Hello guys and welcome back. If you are new around here, I cover mostly Australian true crime cases and today we are covering another solved case. But before we get into it, I want to thank today's incredible sponsor, and that is Native. So Native are a company that create personal care products with ingredients that are safe, clean and cruelty free. And I've been using their natural deodorant for the last few weeks, which is what I want to tell you about today. So I've never personally been super comfortable using many of the deodorants that are on the market today that are not aluminium free. Sorry if you can hear my cat meow. But there really hasn't been many options up until now, that is, or alternatives, especially ones that actually work for me and that are a reasonable price. And trust me when I say I've tried a few alternatives in the past and I found that they're either too sticky or they're just not long lasting or they don't smell the best. Oh, okay. As I was saying, when I first tried Native, I was blown away by a few things that I find pretty hard to find in any deodorant. First off, the Native deodorants smell bloody amazing. My personal favourite is the coconut and vanilla. Coconut just kind of reminds me of being on holidays, so I could not go past that one. I also got the lavender and rose and the cucumber and mint, which both smell just incredibly clean and fresh. I'd say the cucumber is more of a fresh scent and the lavender and rose is more feminine, like you've just ran through a rose bush kind of vibe, if you get my drift. There's way more scents to choose from, however, or there is unscented if that is more your thing. The Native deodorant's also not sticky at all. You just give it a quick swipe and you really don't need much. And it dries super quick, which I really appreciate. Native is also great for me in my day-to-day life as a flight attendant because it's in stick form, so no leaking, no exploding, and I can tell you that this stuff 100% works. I'll throw up a little map of where I fly in Western Australia and the temperatures I'm flying into. It gets to like 40 plus degrees Celsius or around 113 Fahrenheit, give or take a few degrees. So trust me when I say this stuff has been tried and tested in some hectic conditions and it keeps me feeling nice and dry even through the long and hot days of flying and even before filming under two very hot lights. And a few other extra bits of information. Along with being aluminium free, it's also paraben free and sulfate free. Instead, it's made with natural ingredients that I personally feel more comfortable putting on my skin, like coconut oil and shea butter. And it is vegan and cruelty free. So save 33% on your first Native deodorant pack plus free shipping using the link in the first line below. Just make sure you use my code Samantha. And in case you were wondering what the deodorant pack looks like this. Open it up and you have your deodorants. That's my favorite. And yeah, having said all of that, let's get straight into today's case. So we're heading back to the year of 2009. The Lin family lived on a quiet suburban street at 55A Boundary Road in North Epping, Sydney. And they lived in a pretty standard two-storey suburban home with a spacious backyard, a basketball hoop, cream-coloured walls on the inside, and family portraits scattered throughout the place. So the Lin family consisted of husband and wife, 45-year-old Min Lin and 43-year-old Yun Lee Lin, often referred to as Lily. And the Lins had 3 children, 9-year-old Terry, 12-year-old Henry, and the oldest and only girl, 15-year-old Brenda. Both Min and Lily were originally from China, but met in Sydney where they began their courtship. And Lily's sister, 39-year-old Yun Bin Lin, often called Irene, also lived in their home. The Lin family were very successful business owners in Sydney and were well known and liked in their North Epping community. And the business they owned was a popular news agency or newsstand called the Epping Central News Agency. Min worked there every day while Lily and Irene worked there part-time. Min and Lily's primary goal and motivation in their business ventures and in their life was to provide a good life for their 3 children, as they themselves had not had much growing up. Family was very important for the Lin family. Lily's other sister, Kathy Lin, and her husband, Robert Z, lived just down the road, 300 metres or just under 1,000 feet away, with their son. And I believe Kathy also worked at the news agency part-time. Lily's parents, Feng King Ju and Yang Fei Lin, lived just half an hour away in Maryland, and the families would frequently get together to catch up and spend time with each other. Friday, July the 17th was one of these catch-ups. The families went over to the parents' home in Maryland for dinner. All except Brenda, that is, as she was away on a school trip to New Caledonia. It was a pretty normal catch-up by all accounts, but it would be the last day of normality that the Lin family would ever experience again. The next morning, on Saturday, July the 18th, Kathy Lin and Robert Z were notified by several members of their local community that the Lin's news agency had not yet opened for the day, which was incredibly unusual given that it was a Saturday morning at that, any news agency's busiest time of the week. Robert and Kathy quickly headed over to their house to see what was happening. And at around 9 AM, they knocked on the Lin's front door, but received no answer. They soon discovered the door was unlocked and entered the home. They called out to Min and Lily, but received no answer, so they cautiously started making their way upstairs and towards the family members' bedrooms. As they reached the upstairs level, they were greeted with a horrific scene. Blood everywhere. They checked the master bedroom first, and this is where they found the body of Lily Lin lying on her bed, bludgeoned to death. They then ran to Irene's room and she too lay bloodied and motionless. Lastly, they ran to Henry and Terry's shared room. The 2 boys had not been spared in what appeared to be a violent attack on the entire Lin family. Brenda Lin, who I mentioned was away on a school trip, was the only surviving member of their immediate family. There was only one member of the Lin family unaccounted for, Min Lin. They could not find him anywhere. Kathy immediately called 000 and attempted to explain to the operator exactly what she was witnessing, although she seems to struggle to comprehend the situation, which is understandable. In the call, she sounds flustered and shocked, and the frustrated operator repeatedly asks her what has happened to her family and why she needs an ambulance. Of course, all Kathy can comprehend in that moment is that her family is dead. She doesn't know why or how. I'll play a portion of that call for you now.
I need someone to come quick.
We are coming. You need to stop screaming and tell me what the problem is.
Yeah, I think so. My brother's family. Someone killed my brother's family.
Why do you think that?
Yeah, because I went to his house and I knocked the door and the door is just closed and I opened it. And then up the stairs, find my brother. I couldn't find it. I'm not sure.
Where's your brother?
I can find my brother. He's in law. I think someone is dying.
Are they on the ground?
Pardon?
Are they on the ground?
No, they're the bedroom. They're all the bedroom.
In this call, Kathy is also heard begging Robert in Cantonese to not leave her in the house alone. Robert tells her he needs to go pick up her parents, Feng King Ju and Yang Fei Lin, and let them know what is happening. He leaves on the hour-round trip, leaving Kathy alone in the home, terrified and confused. Not long after this, the police and paramedics arrive at the scene. Upon entering the home, police are greeted with a horrific scene that they had not been expecting from the usually quiet suburban neighbourhood. On the upstairs level, there was blood on the walls, the floors, the light switches, the stairwell railing, and some of the bedroom door handles. It was clear it had been a quick and violent attack. Then there was the state of the victims. Their faces were so unrecognisable, first responding officers thought they had been shot. At this point, Min Lin had still not been located, and police began to wonder if maybe Min was the one responsible. So let's briefly talk through a few of the initial observations that were made by police when entering the crime scene. There was no evidence of a break-in, and as I said, Robert and Kathy found the door unlocked, meaning that whoever committed the attacks either had a key to the home, was already inside the home, or the door or possibly a window was unlocked. And nothing had been stolen, so it was not a robbery gone wrong. Police also believed that the perpetrator was familiar with the layout of the home, knowing exactly where to go and where not to go to attack the victims. Power to the home had also been cut from the power box outside, again meaning that the perpetrator had an idea of where to find the home's power box. And to add to all of this, the attacks took place when it was still dark outside, adding to the theory that the perpetrator was familiar with the Lin family home. Then there was Brenda's bedroom. It had not even been touched, let alone entered, during the attacks. This gave a very strong indication to investigators that whoever committed these crimes knew the Lin family personally and knew that Brenda would be away, although some did believe that this was simply a coincidence. So let's go through the crime scene and the attacks in a bit more detail and what police discovered in the days and the weeks following. In the master bedroom, Lily's body was found on the bed on top of the bed sheets. On closer inspection, police found the body of Min Lin concealed by bed covers, and it was determined that they had been the first to be killed. Lily's sister Irene, whose room was just across the hall, was the next to be killed. Her body was found slumped against a bloodied wall in her bedroom. It appeared that none of the adults had any warning before they were attacked. Unfortunately, the two young boys, Henry and Terry, appeared to have been awoken by the attacks on their family. Investigators described finding evidence of a massive struggle in the boys' bedroom. It was clear the boys had attempted to fight off their attacker, and they were the last to be killed. It's presumed the perpetrator left soon after this by going back down the stairs, through the foyer and out the front door into the cover of night. 4 of the 5 Lin family members showed signs of asphyxiation. I think that's correct. And all had signs of blunt force trauma. All were killed almost instantly, except for young Terry. It was soon determined that the weapon used was a hammer or a similar object used to the victims' heads and faces. It's believed that the hammer or hammer-like object had a rope attached to it to ensure the attacker did not lose control and to ensure maximum degree of force during the attacks. But to this day, the actual weapon has never been found. So let's discuss a 15-year-old Brenda Lin. Brenda had been away on a school trip when she learned of the death of her family via Facebook. She was sent home from New Caledonia on the next flight, and her auntie Kathy greeted her at the other end in Sydney for what was understandably a very tearful and emotional reunion. The last family member Brenda saw before her trip was her father Min, who dropped her off at the airport at around 4 a.m. on the Monday morning. So the school trip was part of her French studies. She was there with her classmates to practice the language in a place that actually spoke the language. And Brenda was very studious, so this was an incredible opportunity for her. At the airport, and being the age that she was, Brenda did not give her dad a hug and a kiss goodbye in front of her classmates. She instead stood a little bit awkwardly and said very little, no doubt excited and probably a little bit nervous to get started on her trip. After all, Brenda had thought that she would see him again and her whole family again in a week. She later said that this was her biggest regret, not giving her father one final hug and telling him how much she loved him and appreciated him. As Brenda was still a minor when her family was killed, she was handed over to her auntie and uncle, Robert and Kathy, and they became her legal guardians. In fact, it was Robert that had offered, just hours after the deaths of his in-laws, to adopt Brenda. When Brenda moved in, Robert and Kathy made her feel welcome and attempted to bring some normalcy back into her life. As she was at a crucial stage of her schooling, what she needed more than anything at that point was a sense of normalcy. Brenda also grew very close to her auntie Kathy during this time. And Brenda also had the entire North Epping community rally around her and support her, even setting up a trust fund for her future education. During this time, Robert and Kathy took over and began running the Lin's news agency. On the 8th of August 2009, a funeral was held in Sydney Olympic Park. Their news agency had also become somewhat of a makeshift shrine in their memory, with letters and flowers being left on the sidewalk for the Lin family. Strikeforce Norburn was set up a month after the death of the Lin family to investigate the crimes, led by Detective Sergeant Joseph Marie. And there was an immense pressure on the investigation to solve this case, particularly from the public. So investigators began looking into several theories. The possibility that the killings were gang-related, potential links to the mafia in China, or the possibility that the family were in serious debt. Every avenue and possibility had to be investigated. And it was discovered that several months before the attacks, Min had actually witnessed an armed robbery. And the investigation thought that there may be a connection there, but soon established that there was no link. This case was actually in the headlines for months here in Australia, particularly in Sydney, I imagine. It was a shocking crime, particularly for the local North Epping community. The Lin family was so well known and so well liked. What motive could anyone possibly have to wipe out almost their entire family, including innocent children? It was even initially reported that Min had been the one responsible, killing his entire family and then himself. But police soon determined that this was not the case. As time went on and no new leads surfaced, the case went quiet in the media. The following year, in early 2010, the investigation was firm on the idea that someone close to the Lin family had been involved. Possibly a family member. The fact that the perpetrator seemed to know the house layout, the fact that Brenda happened to be away, and the fact that there were no signs of forced entry, amongst other things pointing to the perpetrator likely knowing the Lin family. At this point, investigators began to take a closer look at Robert Z. Both Robert and Kathy had been interviewed days after the attacks, and in these interviews, Robert, who chose to speak in his native language of Cantonese because this was how he felt most comfortable, described the night before the attacks. He said himself and Kathy attended a family dinner at Kathy's parents' house. Then they both went home for the evening, where Robert stayed up and watched some television. After this, Robert said he'd had a bath and went to bed at around 2 a.m. And this timeline of events is backed up by his wife, Kathy. When Robert spoke of when he entered the Lin family home on the day of the attacks, He struggles to explain what he witnessed. He appears upset, particularly when talking about discovering the bodies of the two boys, Henry and Terry. Robert and Kathy are put under electronic surveillance in early 2010 for a total of 6 months. Investigators also had to assess whether they believed that Brenda was safe living with their one and only suspect. They determined that she was safe. However, just to be on the safe side, they set up a video surveillance inside Robert and Kathy's home. Both Robert and Kathy were interviewed extensively during this time period, and in one of these interviews, Robert trips up. When telling police what he witnessed on the day of the attacks, he described seeing the bodies of his loved ones in their rooms. He said he saw Min lying on the bed next to his wife Lily before police arrived. However, this was not possible as Min was concealed by his bed sheets and was not found until later on. Following this interview, Robert phoned the police and tried to backtrack on what he had said, but the damage was already done. During this time, the investigation began to take a closer look at a few clues found at the crime scene in relation to Robert Z. 24 bloody shoe prints, all believed to be from the same person, were found at the crime scene. They were somewhere between a size US 8.5 to 10.5, and it was soon determined the type of shoe that the shoe prints came from were an Asics sneaker, a brand of shoe that Robert was known to wear. Not that he is the only man in the world to own a pair of Asics sneakers, so this alone didn't really prove anything. However, when the investigation reviewed video surveillance footage from inside Robert and Kathy's home, they stumbled upon something pretty suspicious. In the video, Robert can be seen cutting up an Asics shoebox, size 9.5, and flushing it down the toilet, although it's only presumed that he was flushing it down the toilet because of the continual flushing sounds that can be heard after he cuts up the box. This little piece of evidence prompts a full-scale search of Robert and Kathy's home. During the search, when inspecting Robert's garage, investigators find a tiny stain on the ground, a stain they believed could possibly be blood. So they swabbed it and sent it to be tested. As they waited for the test results to come back, word got out that Robert Z was the investigation's #1 suspect. Both Kathy and Brenda protested his innocence, telling everyone that he was a good man and how upset he was to be thought of as a suspect. Further analysis concluded that the stain contained DNA from 4 of the 5 Lin family members. As it turned out, on the morning of the killings, Robert had been thoroughly cleaning his garage, but it appears he missed this one tiny stain. The following year, on May the 5th, 2011, the now 47-year-old Robert Z was arrested and charged with the Lin family killings, and at this point it had been almost 2 years since the crimes. Brenda Lin was at school when the arrest was made and was informed by her school principal that her own uncle had been arrested and charged with her family's deaths. And Kathy Lin was in the news agency when she received the call about the arrest. Other employees say she ran out of the store in tears. Robert applied for bail following his arrest, but he was denied. The trial began in May of 2014, 5 years after the initial killings. It was a trial by jury and Robert Z pled not guilty. During the trial, it was revealed that Robert was an ENT doctor back in China before he moved to Melbourne with his family in 2002. In Melbourne, Robert owned a restaurant, but this business venture didn't work out, so in 2005, he uprooted his family once again and moved to Sydney, where they would also be closer to family. Robert would later say he felt like an embarrassment to his family regarding his career failings, especially when compared to the Lins and their successful news agency. During the trial, it was said that this was one of the key motives as to why Robert Z killed 5 members of the Lin family. He felt so much rage about his own failings and jealousy of their success in business, he killed them. However, the main motive behind Robert's crime is believed to be his sick attraction and possible obsession with his 15-year-old niece, Brenda Lin. It was revealed during the trial that when Brenda began living with her auntie and uncle, after her family was killed, Robert began sexually abusing her. However, this was not the first time that her uncle was inappropriate with her. Brenda revealed that Robert had inappropriately touched her on a number of occasions during the time her family was still alive. I couldn't find any more information that elaborated on the abuse, but these were the key points that were reported. So it was theorized that Robert Z killed the entire Lin family, bar Brenda, in an attempt to isolate her and to continue to abuse her under his own roof. And when this piece of information about the abuse came out during the trial, the judge declared a mistrial and the details were suppressed from the media. I'm not exactly sure why it was declared a mistrial, but I believe that the abuse claims were new evidence, so it relates to that and it being a fair trial. So this trial suffered many delays for various reasons. As I said, the first one was declared a mistrial, and during the second trial that began in August of 2014, the judge became ill after just 7 weeks, leading to the trial being aborted. Robert applied for bail once again during this time, but again he was denied. A third trial began in February of 2015, and during this trial, Robert Z's lawyer questioned how one man, one very slight man at that, was capable of killing 5 people single-handedly, particularly his 2 young nephews, who he apparently loved very much. His lawyer suggested that the injuries the Lin family received pointed to there being 2 killers involved, and that his client was not one of them. However, the fact that only 1 set of shoe prints were found at the crime scene suggests that only 1 person was involved. The investigation's claims that the perpetrator was familiar with the home's layout was also refuted by his lawyer, who claimed that anybody with a torch could have figured out their way around the home. His lawyer also suggested that the shoe prints had potentially been misidentified as ASIC branded sneakers, and argued that the tiny stain found in Robert's garage, referred to as Stain 91 in court, was not blood, and that the DNA of the Lin family could have ended up in his garage in a number of different ways, seeing as they were such a close family. Of course, none of this explains why he was cutting up an ASIC's shoebox bit by bit and flushing it down the toilet, and the fact that there was no signs of forced entry in the home. Another issue raised in court was the fact that Robert left Kathy alone in the Lin family home to collect her parents when the killer was still on the loose. Also, the fact that Robert had medical training, yet did not even check a pulse of any member of the Lin family. Although you could argue that he did not want to touch the crime scene or felt uneasy in the situation, just to play devil's advocate here. It was also revealed that Robert had access to a spare key to the Lin's family home. His wife had actually been given a spare key, so Robert could have easily have taken that. I should also add it's not believed that Kathy had any knowledge or involvement in the killings. However, she did support her husband through the trials and protested his innocence, claiming Robert was being used as a scapegoat. She told the media he's a good husband, father, son, uncle, and friend. Friends of Robert's who testified in court echoed Kathy's sentiments. And to this day, Kathy stands by her husband. Brenda's relationship with her auntie, however, as you can imagine, was incredibly strained during the trial process. Kathy's own parents, Fung King Ju and Yang Fei Lin, do believe Robert is guilty, however. The trial lasted 10 long months, and in late 2015, the jury deliberated for 19 days, but they could not reach a verdict, and they were dismissed on December the 1st of 2015. Robert was granted bail after this, having spent over 5 years in custody awaiting trial, mostly in solitary confinement, and the judge concluded that it would not be fair to expect the accused to continue to partake in the trial process under these conditions. He was released under strict conditions, although not everyone agreed with this decision, believing his release would allow him to potentially intimidate witnesses. A retrial was set for mid-2016, remembering the initial trial began all the way back in September of 2013, and the killings happened in July of 2009. Just to give you an indication of how long this process was. And just to clarify, I have seriously compacted down all the information from the trials for this video. Obviously, the length of the trial was so long, so huge, we would be here all day discussing it if I talked about everything. So I'm just trying to bring you the real key points in this video. In the 2016 trial, once again, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict, so the judge said that she would accept an 11-to-1 majority. During this time, Robert's bail was revoked and he was taken back into custody on December the 22nd, 2016. Finally, on the 12th of January 2017, the jury found Robert Z guilty on 5 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without any possibility of parole. But he was never charged for the abuse of Brenda Lin. After the verdict was read, Robert stood up and said, "I am innocent." And Kathy also stood up and cried out to the court, "He is innocent." In Brenda Lynn's victim impact statement, she told the court, "It's been 7.5 years since I lost my family. That's 7.5 years without a loving mother, 7.5 years without a loving father, 7.5 years without 2 exuberant brothers who were my best and closest friends, and 7.5 years without an extremely kind aunt. In this time, I have finished my HSC, was accepted into uni, got my first part-time job and learnt to drive. But I have achieved all of these without my family by my side. These inherently happy moments are now at most bittersweet. They have now become a painful reminder of the family I have lost and I will never see again." As of today, the Lin family home still stands on Boundary Road in North Epping. When the home was initially sold, the agency that sold it promised to give any commission that they earned off of it to Brenda. I personally always feel a little uneasy with crimes like this, where the horrific crime takes place in a home and then the home is not destroyed. The Gonzalez family killings, for example, who I spoke about in a video last year, or the Bernies. Their crimes happened back in the 80s, yet their home just went up for sale right here in Perth. I'm sure it's not as simple as just knocking down a home because it has a bad history, but I know myself I would not want to live in a home that has bad juju. Maybe we can have a discussion about this in the comments down below. I'll be really interested to hear what you guys think about this. But anyway, that sums up this case. Thank you so much to my channel members. I appreciate you so incredibly much. Thank you to Native, and thank you so much for being here and listening to the Lin family's story. Like, comment, subscribe, share, and follow my socials. Until next time, stay vigilant and stay safe, and I will see you soon. Bye, guys.